what you're talking about too, and I know Cal Newport is a name in this field who talks a lot
Yeah.
about digital health. And, I got, like I said, that Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, that idea that he talks about a little bit in that book, that you treat your phone like it's got a bedtime, like your kids do. You don't let your kids, stay up at all hours of the night. Like if your kid's bedtime, my kid's bedtime is 7 o'clock. And so if I treat it the same way and I'm parenting my phone in that capacity, then you know what? At 8 o'clock when it's its bedtime, it goes where it goes. I charge it in another room, something like thinking through habits. And what's funny is there are consequences to those decisions. Like for me, I use my phone as my alarm clock. That means I have to buy an actual alarm clock, right? And it's weird. They're actually on Amazon. They sell tons of them. They're there. But it's one of those things where there are going to be sacrifices and consequences that you have to make and that you're going to feel when you make decisions like this. But again, it's positioning yourself. It's making decisions. It's one of those things where it like delays gratification. And, I love the language you're using, Chris, building muscle. Like you're building the muscles that you want to build by making decisions that are going to hurt maybe a little bit on the front end. But anybody who's been in recovery, anybody who's been through healing understands that we have to make those decisions in order to get where we want to be, which is in that health zone for sure.
Yeah, and everyone needs to make the decisions that work best for them. But I think for me, it was helpful to realize that this is a device that's created a need for itself. Because, 25 years ago, no one needed a smartphone because they didn't exist. We all figured out how to do life and we never touched a smartphone.
Yeah.
But what can happen to us is because we've gotten so accustomed to having that convenience, to having that power, as you put it so well, Chris, we're really reluctant to let go of it. And I know for me, when I was starting recovery and my wife was requesting as part of her recovery plan that I need you to not have one, I had all these objections like, but what about, and what about, and what about? And I realized there was this moment of like, well, I need to choose. If I'm serious when I tell her I will do anything it takes to repair our trust and restore this marriage, and she's asking for something, basic, like change the way I use my phone, and it was not easy. It was like, I got to figure it out. I got to figure out a different way to seek out entertainment. I've got to figure out a different way to look up information. I've got to figure out different rhythms of doing life. And there were some adjustments. But I just think for a lot of people, they get caught up in, well, I need it. It's like, it's created a need for itself. And if you really work, you could actually find there are ways you could do life without it. And you could use a WISEPHONE. You could use your devices differently, but it will take an adjustment because it's created a need for itself. And if we're in a place we need to disengage, it will be work, but I really believe it will be worth it.
So Nick, I've got a question for you actually. So back in your non-smartphone years, okay, you said I have to think about finding information. You were talking about some of the inconveniences that you had because of that decision. How did that affect your relationships with other people? I mean, your wife, but others as well, in that moment of not using this convenient system?
I think it was one of the things that God actually used to bring me out of the shame and isolation. Because in recovery, I still wanted to keep control of the information of who knew. Like my wife knew, my counselor knew, and the group of men I was going through 7 Pillars knew. But outside of that, it was like, I don't want people to know. But if you have to print up directions to go somewhere from MapQuest and bring them with you, and you're not looking at your phone, and people are like, why are you doing that? It actually became part of, I think, what God used. I say, I'm actually in recovery from an addiction to pornography, and it's something that I need to not have access to the internet on my phone.
Yeah.
So I print directions. And, pretty soon people, friends, coworkers around me, they all knew as well.
Yeah.
And so it just was that initial hurdle of having to explain that interaction. But I think it really helped to just own, this is what I need for my recovery and to rebuild trust, and I'm doing what it takes. And it was interesting how after, a few months of living without a smartphone, I didn't even think about what I was missing because I developed a new normal.
Yeah.
And I think that's my encouragement to anyone listening is right now, if you're in an unhealthy normal, it's still your normal. And even if you change something unhealthy, it feels hard, but you can get into a healthy new normal.
Yeah.
And you'll realize, oh, this wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. So I think that's what it was for me. Just, it became an opportunity to put my money where my mouth was and do those inconvenient things, but also reminding myself, this is why I'm doing that. I made the choices that earned me this opportunity to have these challenging, inconvenient things, but it's also part of how I'm recovering and getting better by making these choices.
For sure.
One of my favorite things about, I mean, that's a beautiful example. One of my favorite things that I've started to realize is that the more we let go of some of these inconveniences that, or the power that we could have at our fingertips, the more often it drives us up this relational hierarchy away from digital superficial interactions towards more meaningful interactions like you had with your friends. I mean, you wouldn't have had those type of probably more meaningful relationships with your friends had you not had. I mean, you might have to call them up. Hey, how do I get here? If you forgot to print your directions one day, and that actually is cool. There's a cost associated with it, but it connects you more to humans, and I really love what that does.
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it too. It forced me to be more intentional because I couldn't just check my email anywhere, anytime. Like if I was going to be on email, I had to be at my desk computer or on our home computer. And so I started to figure out the things like I'm going to need to know that. And so I'd be looking up directions ahead of time or answering that email ahead of time because I couldn't just rely on the convenience that, anytime I remember, I'll just pop on my phone and take care of that. And I think being more intentional was actually really, really helpful in recovery as well.